I was sitting at the kitchen table and I saw that my glass of milk only had about this much left, and I knew I was going to need more. That's because I had this huge pile of green beans left on my plate yet to eat. I was 8, maybe 9 years old. Well, it didn't really matter. It was pretty much throughout my childhood. I always left the vegetables for last. It didn't really matter what it was, whether it was green beans or peas, or when Mom served the mixed vegetables and had lima beans in it. I had the habit of waiting till the end and then making sure I had a full glass of milk because, for whatever reason, vegetables were hard to swallow for me. You can ask my family, hasn't changed that much. I don't know what it was. The taste buds change, I've heard, every 7 years or so, and you kind of grow out of things. But sometimes there's just some foods that you just can't swallow. Maybe it's kids and vegetables, maybe it's other things. I remember another time, friends invited us over to their house, and he was serving this thing called etouffee or something like that. I don't know what it was. And after we ate it, he told me what he had added into it. Octopus. Yeah, that's why it didn't go down so well. Yeah. It's not as bad as Fear Factor when they're having you eat insects or this or that, and you watch those people, they just can't get it down, and it's somewhat troubling for parents when kids won't eat their vegetables, but you can hear and feel Jesus' heartbreak as he says to the 12, not you too, right? The Bible says that crowds were following after him. John calls them his disciples. Normally we associate that with the 12, but here we realize that throughout Scripture, when in the Gospels, anybody that was following around Jesus and learning from him, they're called disciples. It's a little bit different than our world today in education, where learning is associated with a place. You might go to UNC in Greeley or the University of Colorado at Boulder or in Fort Collins at Colorado State. It's associated with a place, but in Jesus' day, it was associated with a person. Paul went to the school of Gamaliel. It wasn't a place, it was a person. It was one of the most well-known teachers of the time, and Paul followed him. He learned from him, and the same was with Jesus, that people were going and following him, and they were learning from him. As they were learning, they heard something that they just couldn't swallow. Jesus said, I am the bread of life that comes from heaven. And when his disciples, many of them heard that, they started choking. It wouldn't go down. They had a different idea. We had heard a little bit before as Jesus started out talking with them. They wanted him to be a bread king. They didn't like their politicians. They weren't providing for them. And then they saw Jesus and they said, he can solve all our problems. He can just make us bread every day. And we won't have to go to work. And we won't have to pay taxes to the Romans. And this will be great. And Jesus said, that's not what I'm here to give you. The bread from heaven. And when you eat from me, you live forever. They needed more than a full glass of milk. It happened with Pharaoh. It happened with countless other people in the Old Testament, and now we see these multitudes of Jesus' followers and disciples. It was happening to them too. The bread of life was causing them to choke. It was hard for them to swallow everything that he was saying, but it's not just them. Sometimes it's hard for us to digest what Jesus is all about. He had said to them, "You've got to eat my flesh. You've got to drink my blood." He said, "You got to take me all in. I've got to be your all." Remember, he's got to be our staple. He has to be the thing that sustains us. And that's sometimes hard for us to swallow. Because we've got a whole lot of other things that we rely on to sustain us. We've looked at them before. Your marriage, your kids, your health, your retirement. We look at the ways of the world and the wisdom of this world and the things that the world says is important. Jesus says, "I'm the bread of life. You've got to eat me. I've got to be what sustains you through everything. Rely on me." And it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to swallow. One of the reasons was because they looked at Jesus and he didn't look like anything special. Oh, they recognized when he spoke there was something special about him, but this was Jesus and his parents. We know, and he says he's from heaven, but we know he's not from heaven. So what? Doesn't make sense sometimes. Hard to swallow. It's hard to swallow when he says, "Trust me." It's hard to swallow when he says, I know that things aren't going well in your life, but I do love you. It's sometimes hard to swallow. Because we have the problem that they have. They think they know better. They think they can come up to Jesus and say, "Jesus, this is what I need and this is what I want, so give it to me." When that thought creeps into my head, I need to realize something. Who do I think I am? The one who knows all, who loves me, says, "Trust me. I know what's good for you." And I have the boldness to come up to him and say, "No. I know what I need." That's when the bread of life is hard to swallow, because he says, "I give you life." What happened with Pharaoh should happen to me. That Jesus would just keep on speaking and speaking, and yet my heart wouldn't change. I said, someone told me, I'm not sure if it's a wives' tale or not, that yeah, your taste buds change every 7 years, and so that's why sometimes the things you didn't like as a kid you end up liking later on in life. And what a joy it is when the Lord comes to me and offers me the bread of life, and I taste it, and I see how good it is. Lord had come to the prophet Ezekiel. He had come to the prophet Jeremiah. And he says, here, I've got this scroll for you. Eat it. And they ate it. And it tasted good. Jesus pictures that in the book of Revelation for us. He says, here's a scroll, and when you eat it, it's going to make your stomach sour, but it's going to taste sweet in your mouth. The psalm writer said, how sweet are your words to my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth. By the power of his Spirit, he says, I change your taste buds. And now when I offer you the bread of life, it tastes sweet. It tastes sweet when I chew on that promise that says, light and momentary are your troubles here on this earth. The glories of heaven, they far outweigh them. Lord, how sweet. We sing it in that song of praise, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. He says, I lay before you all these promises, and they don't taste like green beans tasted to me when I was 8. They taste like that steak. Melted with a little bit of butter on it with mashed potatoes on the side. Yeah, that's me, Jesus says. It's still a struggle for me to taste and swallow vegetables. But Jesus says, you don't have to look at me like that. Although according to your sinful nature, you don't want to eat me, you don't want to feast on me, he says, I've given you a new self, new taste buds, and now it's a joy. It's a joy to sit down and feast on all of his promises. One of the reasons why it's so hard for people to swallow the bread of life is because they've got guilt. They've got guilt like you and I, and they come up with their own ideas on how to solve it. They throw themselves into work. They throw themselves into their marriage. They throw themselves into their kids and their activities, and they think that somehow that's going to dull the pain. That's why he told Ezekiel. That's why he told Jeremiah. That's what he tells us. Take the scroll and eat it. It may taste a little sour sometimes, but it will turn to sweetness. And that's what we're going to experience in our life. It's going to be the case for us too. Sometimes the word that's brought to us, sometimes it's a little sour, it doesn't taste so good, but it's what I need so that I can enjoy the sweetness. The sweetness of my Savior coming to me and saying, your sins are removed. It's going to be the reaction when we take that word out to the world. That's what Ezekiel and Jeremiah were about to do. He had said, all right, now go take this message to the world. It wasn't a pleasant one. It was one to the Israelites saying, you're going to get punished by God. But he said, take it anyways because it's going to turn sweet. So they went. Many people started choking. They couldn't swallow the message. And that's going to be what happens in our world today too. I don't know if you saw it. Chick-fil-A has tried to get into DIA, one of the concourses, and the city of Denver, the city council, is trying to prevent that, or at least delay it as much as they can, because of the moral stand that they don't agree with. It's not the chicken they don't like. It's the bread. There was a survey. Chick-fil-A was the second highest rated store that people wanted in there for the concourse. Number one was Chipotle, and Chipotle didn't apply. Chick-fil-A was number two. They said that even though they're not going to be open there on Sundays, they're still going to make more money than all the other restaurants that are there in DIA because they like chicken, but the city doesn't like bread. It's hard to swallow. What Jesus says sometimes. And while they're choking on it, we delight. Sweetness is not just the law that shows us this is good and pleasing and this is what I want for your life, but the gospel that says, I know you've got guilt too. I know you're troubled by things in this world, and I let them happen for a reason. So that you don't get too attached to this world. Jesus says, because I'm the bread of life, that you might live forever. There may be some things that you enjoy to eat in this world, but it's not good for you. It's going to lead to your death. So he says, here's your bread. Here's your life. There was a pastor who once tried picturing how great this is and what he wants us to do with this section of Scripture. He said it's kind of like those vending machines, the kind that you actually had to put coins in, not the ones that you could just put your credit card through. Where you had to put the coins in and they would kind of roll, and sometimes you could hear the coin get stuck. Or maybe the coin would get through and then the thing would start spinning, and whatever you're trying to get out of there, it stopped. Two options, or one option you could do in either of those situations. If the coin was stuck, what would you do? Shake it, kick it. If the candy bar or whatever was stuck in there, what would you do? You'd shake it. And he says, the bread of life is coming to you in the form of Jesus, the Word. Don't let it get stuck. Shake it, kick it, say, this is what I need the most. You think how silly it was to really need a soda or a candy bar, but Jesus says, shake it, hit it. I've got what you need. And today we can rejoice. He gives us what we want now. This is what I want. This is what I delight in. I delight in you, the bread of life. And so I come to worship, and so I set aside time in my day, so I gather together with fellow believers because it tastes so good. I don't know. I don't really need a glass of milk anymore. I can choke down the vegetables. But oh, what a joy it is to have that meal on your plate that you just enjoy. You know what they are. Jesus says, I want you to look at me that way. When you hear what's on the menu for the night and you just can't wait, Jesus says, look at my menu. refresh you as you remember your baptism. I fill you up with joy as you dine on my forgiveness. All of that, as that verse of the day points out for us, is just a foretaste. It helps me to look forward to the menu of heaven, where on that menu is no tears, no sadness, no pain, no disease, no broken relationships,